Hello and welcome to the Psychic Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Nikki Peterson. Nikki is a change, loss and grief coach who helps people to find a way to live with their grief. Through Nikki's tragic own experience, a lot of her grief work focuses on baby loss. Nikki, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. It's jolly hot.
It is very warm, and I know you're going to talk about it, but we have to say congratulations on your pregnancy. But so you're in the heat pregnant.
I'm in the heat pregnant, and
which is doubly hot.
Yeah, I don't think any woman ever said, "Oh, I love this heat" at 30 weeks pregnant. So
I can only imagine. So the goal of today is to have an open and honest conversation about your mental health journey, and to get some insight into the tools and techniques that have helped you and are available and accessible to other people. By discussing your journey, what we're trying to do is to share and normalize these conversations about mental health, as often people are not alone in these very, very unfortunate and tragic experiences. Does that sound okay with you?
Of course, yeah.
Cool. Nikki, over to you. Would love to hear about your mental health journey.
Thank you. So yeah, we just mentioned my pregnancy, which is actually my fourth pregnancy. Back in 2006, I was pregnant with my first child, and unfortunately I went into labour at 23 and a half weeks, which is super early. Yeah, you know, normal pregnancy is 40 weeks. Yeah. And we had a little girl, Rosie, and she died after 6 days, which was just horrendous, you know.
So sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Was not in any way prepared whatsoever to deal with that.
How can you prepare for that, right?
Well, I don't know, and I still don't know the answer to that. Yeah. I don't think you can. I don't think you can. You know, you have so many thoughts about being pregnant and the baby afterwards, and you know that journey kind of begins when you start talking to your partner about even getting pregnant. So it's, you know, it's not that it's just kind of happened then. There's a lot of thoughts, and you know, generally, yeah, we're going to try for a baby, we've got a baby, you know, it's all happy, but yeah, sadly the stats show that that's, you know, it's not the case. 1 in 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage.
1 in 5.
1 in 5.
That's extremely high.
It is. It's absolutely huge, and you know, so many people still have no idea what to say when somebody's miscarried. So, not to get kind of technical, but a miscarriage is referred to a pregnancy that is lost before 24 weeks. So I think one of the main things that I remember after seeing my GP was that he referred to my live born child as a miscarriage, and I just, what the hell?
That's just, I mean,
what the hell? And I think that, you know, there's a big piece around looking after women who have gone through baby loss, about the language that even medical professionals use. You know, to some of them it's just part of the job, you know, but it's
certainly not that for the person experiencing it.
It's not, no.
And I can imagine the last thing you want to hear is something that almost feels like a statistic. And it, you know, and you know, I'd like to ask, like, how did it make you feel? Angry?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was actually, I think, probably shocked more than anything, that I just thought, how can you refer to my live born child as a miscarriage? And it was just such a kind of off the cuff statement, you know, just not thought through, no sympathy, no empathy, just, oh God. Now when I think about it, I feel really angry. I feel really, really, really angry. But I guess that kind of has fed into the work that I do. You know, I'm 15 years on now from having Rosie. But that's a big part of the work that I do, is, you know, just kind of trying to like normalize what's the conversations and get people talking about it. Hence why, you know, more than delighted to be here today.
Thank you so much for being here.
because people still don't know how to talk about grief in general. You know, it's fact, we're all going to die, you and I are going to die at some point, but that conversation is still very, very taboo. You know, people still don't know how to handle grief. It's something we can't practice at, so we can't get good at it. And yet with miscarriage in particular and baby loss, it is so tragic that people just do not know what to say to you. The emotions of grief, you know, obviously come into play for the mother in particular, but also, you know, the other parent involved. And so many people just can't talk about it, don't feel that they can talk about it. You know, some of the comments that you get if it's an early miscarriage, which is classed as before 12 weeks, which a lot of women haven't even shared that they're pregnant before 12 weeks. So then if they have this miscarriage, so many of them are suffering in silence. When they do share it, you get comments like, well, at least you've got pregnant. It's just not meant to be. You can try again, you're young enough to try again. You know, these comments are not helpful.
No, not at all. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, the thought process where someone would say something like that. And I'd like to ask, like, in that situation, like, what would be a comforting language to hear? Is it simple to say, I'm so sorry you've gone through this, and if there's anything you need, I'm here to talk?
Yes, absolutely that. It's exactly that. Just knowing that somebody is thinking of you is good. You know, we were left food parcels, which is just one of the best gifts, because you know, sometimes you don't want to eat, sometimes you just want to eat, but you certainly can't be bothered to cook. Yeah, definitely just let somebody know that you are thinking of them, and that, you know, there's no pressure to get back to anybody. Because some days, you know, I remember in those early days after I had Rosie, some days all I wanted to do was talk to somebody, but then another day I just want to hide under the duvet. And I feel, you know, this is my journey, but obviously my husband was very, very much part of that journey, but there's so much focus on the mum that he is, you know, he is hugely grieving at the same time, yet there's a need for the other partner to support the mum so much more, and often the father is forgotten, and that is really, 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 really sad. And I saw something just a few days ago, actually, on LinkedIn of all places. A guy, unfortunately, his partner had just gone through the same thing, and he was questioning, where's the support for dads? You know, his wife has been checked in on, how's she doing physically and emotionally, but no one had asked him anything. And that, you know, that I'm sure, you know, you and I both know that suicide in men is one of the biggest killers for men under 40. And men need to be able to have the space to talk about this. And that's something I feel super passionate about as well, is that men don't kind of get forgotten about. And then there's also the added bit with the grandparents as well, especially if it's the first grandchild. But yeah, it's still just not spoken about enough.
And it's amazing to hear you speak so openly about it, 15 years later, and like you said, you're pregnant now with you and your partner. What were the steps, what were the conversations that you have? How did you get the support or give each other support to bring you along this journey in a way that you can speak about it so openly?
So I think I don't really know. I guess we just kept talking. Nick and I had been together for 8 years, so we knew each other like inside out. And in those very, very early days, so I stayed in hospital for the whole 6 days whilst Rosie was with us. And then I remember coming home and just I felt like I'd done like 10 rounds with Mike Tyson. I was just bruised and battered all over, you know, yeah, physically and
Yeah, I
emotionally.
mean, because at that time you've gone through a very physically traumatic experience at the same time. Like there is I mean, I can't, yeah, I mean that combination's crushing.
Yeah, yeah, to, you know, labour's not called labour for for no reason. So you've gone through that and then you come home without a baby, and that's just awful, absolutely awful. Fortunately, and I say kind of fortunately, perhaps it's not the best word, but we didn't actually have any baby stuff in the house, which I was really, really grateful of, because I think that would have just been, you know, even more unbearable. But Nick and I just, you know, we kept on talking. He went back to work soon after, and I think that was he needed kind of a focus and something to do, whereas I needed to, I think, just kind of do nothing. I really remember, and I'm reminded every year now, that the snooker's on around that time of year. So I had Rosie on the 26th of April, and that's always a reminder. I mean, I've got no interest in snooker whatsoever, but that kind of absorbed my attention at the time, because I think it was just something where I could totally zone out and just, yeah, I really remember laying horizontal on the sofa watching that late at night. I think one of the most difficult things that I found was the delay in when Rosie died and her funeral. It was quite a long time. And that was hard. That was really, really hard, because it just felt like I was in this limbo time. And yet you see the world around you just kind of carrying on as normal, and that feels really weird.
And it must be hugely intense to almost, what I'm imagining is almost being like dragged along in a tidal wave of these processes. So this tragic experience, which is so fresh, and you're obviously not going to kind of process it and cope with it quickly at all. And then suddenly you've got to think about, right, we've got to think about a funeral. We've got to think about, speaking to the world. We've got to think about work. You've got to think about all these things. And you're like, well, hold on, this is, I mean, it sounds impossible to deal with that. And did you find that you had support from people to help you with those processes? Because when, let's say someone who passed away of old age, you often have the family kind of supporting and helping with the processes. Did you find that support helpful?
Yeah. I mean, I'm really, really lucky to have brilliant kind of friends and family around me. And I think one of the biggest things was my employer at the time was absolutely fantastic. Really, really, really brilliant. They pretty much allowed me to have my kind of full, if I wanted it, my full maternity allowance. I did take, I think it's about 3 months off. And I felt fully supported by them, and that's a real rarity, I have to say. Even now, 15 years on from when I experienced that, there's still a lot of workplaces where, a woman will have a miscarriage, and I've heard of some stories, she's then in work the next day. I mean, that is just I can't get my head around that.
The complete lack of awareness and understanding and empathy and sympathy of what's going. I mean, there may be the other side where, like you said, after a few weeks, getting back to that structure is what the person wants, but that's on their terms, right? Whereas actually what you're wanting from an employer is just to say, we give you the space and time.
Yeah.
And frankly, when someone does go onto maternity leave, it's all planned for, right? Like forcing people to come back in after a short period of time when you plan to be without that person for a few months just doesn't make any sense. Like you've got to give them that support.
No, it doesn't. But luckily, more organisations are changing or bringing in kind of maternal pregnancy loss policies. So Channel 4, is it Channel 4, Monzo, Lidl, there's a law firm, Kingsley Napley, they've all got, they are bringing in pregnancy loss policies, which is great to see.
Yeah.
Really, really great to see. But you know, that's 10 days off if they experience baby loss at any gestation whatsoever. So, you know, changes are coming, but it's still, in my opinion, far too late, far too slow. Because the stats kind of associated to mental health issues after pregnancy loss are enormous. I mean, just to share some, a single miscarriage makes somebody 3.8 times more likely to die by suicide. That's after just one miscarriage. And many women will have 3 or more miscarriages before they're then investigated by kind of a maternal team as to why it's happening. Tom is, who is one of the biggest baby loss charities, are doing so much work around this. But even 9 months after a pregnancy loss, 17% of women are experiencing moderate or severe anxiety, 18% of women are experiencing post-traumatic stress, and yet the stats to give these women maternal health or mental health support, it's just not there. It's not there. Fewer than, I think it's 16% of women are offered mental health support after the loss of a baby.
And therefore it requires that person to be proactive to get that support in whatever way they can. But you're not, I can't imagine you're in the most proactive state after that, right? Like,
not at all.
And also there's a reality as well, like getting that support, if you're not able to access the NHS or there's a massive waiting list, you've got to pay for it. And it's bloody expensive. Like it is, and we say this a lot as sidekick, like it's a privilege to be able to go and seek mental health support, which is why talking about and understanding your journey so that people can resonate with it and understanding how you coped and the things that you did might give people some ideas, because that's what there comes a stage with any crisis where you don't want to feel like this anymore. And you want to not move on because you can't move on from these things, but you want to be able to cope.
Yes, there's a wonderful kind of graph, and it's kind of like a circle, and it's a circle of your grief, and what happens is that circle doesn't get any smaller, but you kind of grow around the grief, so you get bigger around the grief.
That's a really good one. That's a really good way to put that.
Yeah, the grief absolutely never, ever, ever disappears. It's always there. We celebrate Rose's birthday every single year. She's a big part of our family. So I've got 2 girls, Tiger and Betsy, who are 10 and 11. So this baby number 4 on the way is very much a surprise. I'm 42 now. Yeah, definitely wasn't part of the plan, but hey, we had a lockdown last year, so I guess that's something.
I think there are a few lockdown babies in the statistics coming up, right?
I believe there are. Yes. My midwife team have mentioned that there seems to be a particular boom. May
I ask, and if you don't mind talking about it, because like you said, you have 2 children now. That experience of getting pregnant again for the first time after such a tragic situation, I can't even imagine what that would have felt like, and the anxiety or the nervousness going through those 9 months.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I was really fortunate with my work. They really helped me by giving me the space and time that I needed off, so that was great. 6 months after I had Rosie, I found myself kind of not talking about what happened, and I was really fortunate that I recognized that I perhaps wasn't dealing with it in the best way possible at all, and again, incredibly lucky that I managed to get some counselling on the NHS, and I think that allowed me to process my grief much better. And therefore, I could not imagine a life without children. And I think having had that counselling support definitely prepared me to, I guess, deal with it and yeah, then knew that I was prepared to try again. And actually I was okay. So when I got pregnant with Tiger, which was 3 years after we had Rosie, it wasn't kind of planned. Whether that was a subconscious thing, I don't know. But then what I haven't mentioned yet is I went into labour with Tiger at 28 weeks and 6 days. So again, really early, and we were told that Tiger might not live. She might not make it through the first night. It was exactly the same scenario. I'd had her at the same hospital that I'd had Rosie. Both Tiger and Rosie were rushed down to another hospital where they needed the neonatal care. And yeah, there we were again, just deja vu, but thankfully completely different outcome, which at the time was really difficult to get our heads around. And the team at the Trevor Man Baby Unit in Brighton are just absolutely amazing. And you know, I still remember them saying that they purposely put Tiger in a different place to where Rosie was in the incubator, so everything was, you know, the same. We recognized some of the faces, and that was just weird, and never did we think we were going to be back in that environment.
But I think those the neonatal staff and unit, and I mean, they go through, you know, if there's they despite going through it every day, some of the very difficult situations, they don't seem to lose their compassion. Like, they really get it that this is a really, really, really difficult situation. And, you know, I can imagine the emotions that go through separating the child from the mother and seeing, and then attempting to care for that baby. I mean, it's just staggering. It's staggering how they do that day in, day out.
I know. And I remember one of them saying to me, oh, my husband is a chef. And I remember her saying, oh, what a stressful job. Oh my God. Oh, God. And I'm like, hang on, let's just put this into perspective. He is feeding people. He is just literally putting food on a plate for people that have decided to go out for dinner. You're in here and you are quite literally the life support for my child. You know, just the selflessness of the work that they do is, you know, that made me smile, because I just thought, oh my God, it's so beautiful that I've got somebody like you that doesn't recognize how brilliant you are caring for my daughter. And I just knew that Tiger was in really, really safe hands. Never did I kind of doubt that she wasn't getting the best care possible. But yeah, she was in hospital for 8.5 weeks, and it was a bumpy 8.5 weeks. But she's an incredibly fit, strong, amazing, adorable, gorgeous 11-year-old. And then, yeah, we've got Betsy, who came along 21 months later. I remember telling my mum that I was pregnant with her. And my mum was just like, what are you doing to yourself? What are you doing to all of us? But I felt that we could deal with it. I guess if I wasn't in a good headspace to do it, there's no way that I would have got pregnant. That's the way that I kind of view it.
You feel that the counselling, and I can I assume it was specifically grief counselling that got you through that, or was it just more counselling in general?
Yeah, it was very much related to the loss of Rosie, and each session was completely different. You know, sometimes I would almost just cry for the whole session. But I remember other times going in and feeling kind of quite happy, which, as I say that now, you know, there's almost a little bit of guilt, but that's life, you know. And these are the kind of tools that I teach on my baby loss coaching now, that guilt does come with, you know, with your feelings, but there's no reason to feel guilty. But we are human beings, and that's our kind of natural instinct, you know, when we've lost somebody, to feel happy. It's like, well, how can I be feeling like this? But that's part of the grief, you know, part of the grieving process, that we do move on. And, you know, why shouldn't we be happy? Why shouldn't we smile again?
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. But I also remember one of the counselling sessions, I went in, and I think because I'd processed kind of what had happened and just felt an immediate connection with my therapist as well, I knew that I was going to be able to kind of, you know, move forward. And I refer to that piece as almost like a chapter, and that I was able to turn the page and kind of carry on. But because I looked, I think, better, one of her questions in the session was, you know, or not a question, she thought I was going to tell her that I was pregnant, because I just looked happier. But yeah, why shouldn't we?
I'll be interested to understand that you like you said, you work as a grief and loss coach. Like, if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking us through that grief journey, and I know it's very different for a lot of people, but perhaps how you do guide people through to understand those stages.
Yeah, I think what you've just said there is, you've almost summed it up, that grief is it's a very different journey for everybody. You know, my husband and I, we were grieving exactly the same thing. You know, we'd both lost our firstborn daughter, yet we grieved so completely differently. And that's what a lot of people don't even realize, that grief is unique. You grieve at different times. It's definitely not easy. It's incredibly difficult. But knowing that your grief is unique, even when dealing with the same thing, because I think a lot of the feedback that I get from my baby loss work is that partners are grieving quite differently and at different times. And that can almost cause conflict, because, you know, what one person might be feeling, the other person almost, if they're just kind of almost not ready to like face the grief, accept the grief, they're avoiding it. For example, you know, the man might just go back to work and really throw themselves into work, because that's what they actually need to do in those kind of initial stages. And that to the mum can be seen as, well, they don't care, but it's not that at all. It's just that the grieving process is happening at very, very different times. There's so many, oh God, there's so many emotions linked to grief, you know, that can change hourly, let alone daily.
That's what I was going to ask, should grief be thought of as a process or an emotion or an emotional process? Because it's something it happens to everyone at some point. You know, everyone will grieve for different reasons. Is it something that is treatable as something to, you know, as something that's emotional, or is it something that's in your thoughts? Is it something that is physical? Is it everything?
It's all of the above. It's all of that. You know, grief, yes, grief is absolutely an emotion, which is why, you know, you can be in denial, you can be angry, you can be in shock, all of those things. And it's also very physical. Grief can get stuck inside of you. And that's something else that I talk about on my courses, that it's really important to move. You know, you and I both know that any form of kind of physical exercise is good for general mental health, but particularly good for grief. And when I say move, you know, that doesn't have to be a run. It could just be some simple stretches, because yeah, grief can physically get stuck in your bodies, or in our bodies. But it's so important to grieve properly, because unresolved grief can really lead to depression, being a lot less happier in life. And it's important, it's so important to recognize grief for what it is. And yeah, learning to live with grief does allow you to kind of process it and move on and be happy again. And also, you know, like in particular, when we're talking about baby loss, trying again for a baby, you know, being mentally prepared to to do that.
Which I mean, I think you mentioned that, you know, your first child wasn't planned. Your first child wasn't planned. Like, going through that, and do you think it helps not planning in some respects? Because you know, having got a 2-year-old myself, and remembering the kind of the planning process, I mean, that does have its emotional stresses with it as well. Like, if, you know, especially if things don't happen very quickly, it could happen. There might be some interventions required for fertility, for example, and it's a journey in itself, which does come along with its enormous ups and downs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes back to something I said right at the very beginning. When you start planning, that is part of your baby journey. You know, when you and your partner kind of think, right, let's have a baby, or you know, even when you start those conversations, that is the start of that process of having a baby. So I think, yeah, the fact that Nick and I hadn't kind of planned to have Tiger definitely helped, definitely helped, because I think if we were really thinking about it, you know, stress plays a huge factor on whether or not one can conceive. And yeah, so I think I was quite kind of casual about getting pregnant, and
it
obviously
worked.
we were both delighted, and it worked. Yeah. Yeah.
And how have you found motherhood from those early days? You said it was did you say it was 26 weeks?
So Tiger, I had her at 28 weeks.
Beg your pardon, 28 weeks. So from that, because 28 weeks is, they're like, you know, they're still very, 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 very small, you know, and the process to get home is longer.
Yeah.
And then becoming a mother and adapting into that role as well, that must be, it's very unique and very personal to everyone. But having gone through what you've also gone through, that could be, I suppose, a bit more complicated. I was just thinking in relation to, you know, we've had people on here in our podcast talking about postnatal depression.
Yeah.
Going through what you went through, do you think that, you know, with heightened anxiety and heightened emotions, could lead to potentially those impacts of depression when your child comes, you know, when you do become a mother?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 1 in 10 women will suffer from postnatal, perinatal depression, regardless of any previous maternal history. So that, I mean, that's another conversation. And that in itself is huge. And again, you know, the access to mental health is very, very limited for maternal mental health. But, you know, when you come out of special care baby unit, you know, the most intensive special care baby unit, which Tiger was in, you are coming out of a very, very clinical environment. You know, you go in, and this is obviously long before COVID, but, you know, before you enter, it's the washing your hands up to your elbows, you know, making sure you're kind of as clean as possible. You know, those early days, I couldn't hold Tiger for over a week because you just had to be in the incubator. You know, my kind of attachment to her, cleaning her, was a cotton bud, and like cleaning around her mouth where she had her ventilator. You know, this, I could just put my hands through the incubator and touch her. So when she came out of hospital, I was obviously super protective of her, and we didn't do the normal mother and baby groups for quite some time. I remember going out in the nearest town to where we lived once, and a much older lady started putting her hands in and touching her face, and I just thought, get out! Yeah. Oh my God, what do you think you're doing?
But also, it is amazing how there's a lot of random people who do want to touch, you know, who come up to you and want to kind of, you know, stroke your child and go, oh, you know, please can I give them a hug or something? I find that very bizarre.
No, absolutely not. If I could swear, I would. But, you
Please
know,
do.
just like, get taking your hands off of my child. You know,
Yes.
how would you feel if I started touching your face, you know?
People don't think like that. It's amazing.
Bizarre actions, really,
bizarre.
really bizarre. So it did take me a long time, probably, I think about 8 months to comfortably go into a kind of mother and child group. Yeah.
And I've forgotten about that, actually. Those first few months after having a child, and in those groups, they can be quite kind of strange interactions, especially if they're not your close friends. They're kind of basically just people you've met on an antenatal course or whatever it's going to be. And yeah, it's difficult, I suppose, to find your footing, and I suppose, you know, triply, quadruply difficult if you've been through a very difficult tragic experience.
Well,
like
yeah,
yourself.
I hadn't kind of reached the term to even get to antenatal classes with either Rosie or Tiger, so I didn't have that little network. But yeah, I as we spoke about just before we kicked off the podcast, I live in a village which is really lovely, and there's a beautiful little baby group at the bottom of my road in a Baptist church run by the most delightful women, and they couldn't have made me feel more welcome, which was lovely, which was really, really, really lovely.
Kind of talking about the tools, tips, and techniques that helped you along your way. So you've spoken about grief counselling, which you were lucky to. You said you got it on the NHS, which for those of you not in the UK is our public health service. Are there any other things that helped you? You mentioned exercise as being something that was really key for grief. Any other tools and tips?
I think if you are able to recognise a change in the pattern of your normal behavior, try and be mindful of that. And that is, I say that, but it's incredibly difficult, because when you're going through such a tragic loss, it can be difficult to be in touch with kind of your emotions, and let alone even understand them. But if you are able to recognize that change in pattern, talk to people that you can talk to, and certainly if you feel that you need it, go to your GP, try and get the therapy that you need. One of the things that I always recommend, that I'm a huge fan of, is journaling, because that's just an incredibly safe, private way where you can express all of your thoughts, feelings, and even your behaviors. You don't have to share that with anybody, and it's a way of really expressing those feelings, so you're getting it out.
I just want to say as well, for those of you listening, journaling, it comes with its own, especially if you go on Instagram and Facebook, there's the whole kind of world of journaling. But at its very core, it's simply pen and paper writing down your emotions, right? Like this thing of journaling is effectively almost like a brand now, whereas actually, don't be scared of it. It is pen, it is paper, it could be a phone, it could be on your notepad, whatever it is. It is writing down how you feel and how you think in hopefully a regular manner. Because it has been shown, there's loads of research that shows that the act of writing down how you feel, even if it's just gobbledygook.
And it can be gobbledygook, because how can you, it just can be whatever you want it to be. And I think that's probably my most important thing to say about journaling, is there's no right or wrong way to journal.
No structure needed. You just get it out of your head.
You don't need to be a writer. Don't worry about punctuation. Don't worry about how it looks. Don't worry about your spelling. Just get it out. It's a really simple way, as you say. All you need is a pen and a paper, and just write. And it is amazing at what comes out.
And it's interesting what you say about not caring about what it looks like. You actually don't even need to read it.
No,
you don't need to go back. Why? You could have 10 volumes of your journals, but the therapeutic the alleviation of that stress is in that writing. You never need to look at those books again. And actually, I had a situation where I wrote something down and I thought, you know what, I'm going to burn the damn thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? Made me feel really good.
Yes. And that's what a lot of people do. And they do write these, you know, not necessarily related to grief, but just whatever they want to write, and then they do burn it, and it's almost like you're really letting it go. You've got it out of your system, and you are letting whatever it is, you know, whatever those emotions are, thoughts, you are letting it go. But it's such a safe space to be able to express those emotions. And as you just said, there is scientific evidence that shows journaling is incredibly powerful for everyday journaling, but yeah, very much so grief journaling is incredibly good for your mental health.
Just before we draw to a close, I'd love to ask about for someone who is feeling overwhelmed with their grief, which I assume is a very, very usual situation. How would you not let it consume you? How do you not let it, like you say, you painted this really good picture about the grief in the center, you growing around it and into it, so to speak. But what happens if that grief is so big that you are struggling to do that?
Well, that's when, do you remember I mentioned about kind of unresolved grief and why the grieving process is so important? So that kind of, I would say that you're then moving perhaps into depression, you know, possibly, because if you can't, you know, if every day is becoming a struggle, you know, grief is not depression. That's one thing to make clear, that grief is an emotion, and it is not depression. However, if you are unable to move forward to think about anything other than your grief for an extended period of time, and there is no, you know, what is an extended period of time, because as I say, everybody's grief is unique. It really does depend on the individual, and of course grief can be absolutely overwhelming, but it very much depends on the individual and what their normal kind of behaviors are. But if you feel totally consumed by your grief, completely overwhelmed, that you cannot think about anything other than your grief, you absolutely need to seek professional help.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, the bottom line is to keep talking about it. So talk, even if you just vent. You know, even if the person you're talking to doesn't know what to say, just keep talking. And it seems to be more of this, so keep it all, you know, get it out of yourself, get it on paper. There's a lot of that kind of processing, because as I think, like we said earlier, like grief is a fundamental part of our life at some point, you know, and everyone will experience grief at some point. And the body and the mind do have mechanisms to help process that, but you've got to access those. And by talking about putting it on pen and paper, it seems to stimulate and activate those things to help you cope and help you never move on, like I say, but to help you feel happy again, which is, you know, and feel more positive.
Yeah, and I also think one of the things that I discuss on my grief coaching is sometimes you do need to have a social or even a friend detox, because you've got, you know, when you are grieving, you want to feel listened to, you want to feel heard, and if you've got somebody that is not hearing you, that is interrupting you, whose grief seems more valid than your grief, really unhelpful stuff, sometimes you just have to have a kind of, like a friend detox almost, because that can sometimes add to that overwhelm, that if you just want to talk to somebody but you're not feeling heard in the way you want to be heard, it's not helpful.
I think it's a crucial thing to say, like, there's keep talking but also keep listening as well, right? Like we've spoken about this before, like there's a lot of people who are talking at the moment about mental health, and that is a very positive thing, but I'm not convinced that we're really improving our listening. We hope through these kind of podcasts that you can show that how to listen I'm certainly guilty of not listening in a lot of them. I can be very, 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 very chatty, but to take the time to pause, to give someone the space to say what you're thinking, what I'm thinking is not valid at the moment. It's not valid. It is about, you've got to empathize. This person, Nikki, needs to speak, needs to talk. Let them talk. And when you feel like it, talking, shut your mouth.
Yeah.
Because, and it's like, I love this thing that someone said to me, and it's not original at all, but you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, do it in proportion.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you can't say more than that, to be honest.
No, exactly that. But often the person grieving is actually the one that's offering the support to the person opposite them, because they feel more uncomfortable talking to the person that's grieving, and that, that's not right, is it?
No, it's not.
The support should be given to that person that is
and the support doesn't need to be words of wisdom or advice. It's just literally just sit back and I'm here to support you, and that even if it's non-verbal, you don't need to say it. I'm here to support you. I'm checking in every day. Nikki, thank you so much for your time today, being so honest and open with such an incredibly difficult journey. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Just search for Sidekick Community or Sidekick Stories and we'll pop up. And please do give us a rating if you like the show. And please check out our free Sidekick app for iPhone and iPad. It's a collection of interactive exercises, tools and tips to help you boost your mental well-being. The app enables you to build a personalised well-being toolkit to help you deal with life's ups and downs. Just go to our website, www.sidekick.org.uk, and click the download now button in the header to take you to the App Store. Nikki, thank you so much again.
Thank you.